The job offer couldn't have come at a better time. 3 days after losing my university grant, killing my research on post-war American home life, Julian Croft's email landed in my inbox. He offered an absurd amount of money to digitize old VHS tapes at his family's estate in western Massachusetts. Hearing the price, I agreed right away. My wallet was empty, so caution pretty much flew out the window. The drive took me deep into the Berkshires. The road got narrower as thick woods closed in. Croft Manor loomed against the gray afternoon sky. It was a huge stone fortress that seemed to suck in light instead of reflecting it. Julian Croft met me at the door, younger than expected, lean, with a sharp smile that didn't touch his eyes. "The archive's in the basement," he said, leading me through winding hallways. Dusty treasures sat next to shiny new tech. "My family recorded everything. For generations." "What are you hoping to save?" I asked, my historian brain peaked despite the strangeness. "Everything," he stated flatly. "No picking and choosing, just transfer what you see." He paused. "And try not to overthink what's on the tapes. It's private, family stuff." The basement door opened with a hiss of air, weirdly modern for the old place. The room was huge. Row after row of industrial shelves stood loaded with thousands of identical white VHS tapes, none labeled. At the center, my workstation waited, high-end equipment glowing cold blue against the damp stone walls. "Some tapes might be damaged," Croft warned before leaving me. "Visual weirdness, scrambled sound. Just capture what's there." The soft hum of the machines was the only sound in the heavy quiet. That first day, I set everything up. As evening fell, I picked the first tape. At first it was mundane. Christmas morning, a lakeside cabin vacation. But the footage had a strange, unsettling look. Creepy depth and clarity that felt too real. The colors were too bright, the movements too smooth, not like old VHS tape should look. I worked late, the basement's chill settling into my bones. After midnight, I slid in the last tape for the night. A fancy dinner party in the manor's dining room. Men in tuxes, women in evening gowns, crystal catching light under a chandelier I recognized. Mid-conversation, every face at the table warped at the same instant. Their expressions twisted into masks of silent agony. Eyes bulging, mouths stretched impossibly wide, sinews standing out on their necks. It lasted just a split second before snapping back to pleasant smiles and light laughter. I jerked back from the monitor, my heart pounding. I rewound the tape, leaning close. This time, nothing. No distortion. No screaming faces, just elegant chatter and laughter. "Tape decay," I muttered, my voice thin in the dead silence. But as I climbed the stairs to the bedroom, those faces stayed burned onto my mind, frozen in torment behind the screen's glass. And something else nagged at me, the terrible feeling that for that one brief moment, every single one had been staring right at me. I didn't sleep well that night. Each time I closed my eyes, those distorted faces appeared. Silent screams frozen in time, eyes locked with mine across the impossible barrier of the screen. I told myself repeatedly it was just tape degradation, a common artifact in old VHS recordings. The rational explanation didn't stop the cold feeling that had settled in my stomach. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the grimy windows of my bedroom. I forced myself to eat breakfast, though the toast tasted like cardboard in my mouth. The job paid too well to abandon over what was likely just my imagination working overtime in this oppressive house. Back in the basement, I settled at my workstation. The clinical hum of the equipment provided the only comfort in the cavernous space. I selected another tape at random from the seemingly endless collection, inserted it, and began the transfer process. This one contained footage of a child's birthday party sometime in the early 90s, judging by the fashion and decor. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling of a sunlit living room. A small boy, maybe 6 years old, sat beaming at the head of a table surrounded by other children. The scene was innocent, mundane. I began to relax. Then I saw it. In the doorway at the back of the room, partially obscured by shadow, stood a figure. Tall and unnaturally thin, it remained perfectly still while the party continued around it. No one acknowledged its presence. No one even glanced in its direction. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. The figure's proportions were wrong. Its limbs too long, its torso too narrow. And its head was tilted slightly, as if it were looking past the oblivious family, directly at the camera. Directly at me. A chill ran down my spine. I paused the tape, studying the figure. The longer I stared, the more certain I became that it didn't belong in the scene. It wasn't just standing in the doorway, it was standing between the doorway and the camera, like a flaw in reality itself. I hit play again, watching to see if the figure moved. It didn't. It remained a static presence throughout the entire birthday scene. When the tape ended, I sat back, heart pounding in my chest. "Just a family member," I said aloud, my voice sounding hollow in the basement stillness. "Just someone standing in the background." But I didn't believe it. For the next several hours, I worked mechanically, transferring tape after tape. My ears began to play tricks on me. Between the whir of the VCR and the hum of the computer, I started hearing a soft crackling, like static. It persisted even when I stopped the equipment, a faint electric hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. By late afternoon, my nerves were frayed. I needed air, space, anything to clear my head. I stopped the current transfer and headed for the stairs. The mansion was eerily quiet as I made my way to the kitchen. The long hallway stretched before me, the weak daylight failing to penetrate its shadows. I was halfway down when I froze. At the far end, just where the hallway turned, stood a dark shape. Tall, motionless, its proportions unmistakable. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed myself against the wall, eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. "A trick of the light," I whispered to myself. "Just the house playing tricks." But as I forced myself to continue down the hallway, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The figure from the tape had followed me out of the screen. It was here, in the house, watching. I made it to the kitchen and braced myself against the counter, gulping down air. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the trees in blood-red light. Soon the house would be dark except for the harsh fluorescence of the basement. I couldn't bring myself to go back down there. Not yet. But I also couldn't escape the feeling that whatever I had seen, on the tape and in the hallway, was now aware of me, and that in this vast, empty house, I was no longer just an observer. I was being observed. Sleep offered no refuge that night. Each time I closed my eyes, silent, screaming faces rushed towards me, followed by the tall, thin shadow watching from the hall. I kept jolting awake, heart pounding, certain I could hear the faint crackle of static whispering through the walls. Morning found me exhausted down to my bones. I needed answers. This had moved beyond just completing the job. I needed to know what was happening. I tried calling Julian Croft, straight to voicemail. I left a careful message about distorted artifacts, and questions about the collection. My email bounced back instantly. Unavailable. All queries to be addressed upon completion. Isolation pressed in hard. The nearest town was miles away, and the promised money was too substantial to abandon, even as my fear grew. I went back down to the basement with a new goal. Was there a pattern? A timeline that explained these horrors? Hours passed as I tried to catalog, but the tapes resisted all sense. Birthday parties from the 80s sat next to business meetings from the 90s. Family vacations blended with footage of empty rooms. It was those last ones that snagged my attention. Dozens of tapes showed long, static shots of empty spaces. A dining room, a study, a bathroom. I'd dismissed them as useless surveillance. Now they felt like waiting, watching. Late that afternoon, I found a tape that froze my blood. The footage showed a bedroom, my bedroom upstairs. The tape looked brand new. The angle showed the bed, the nightstand with my phone charger, even my barely unpacked suitcase. "This isn't possible," I whispered, fingers searching the blank cassette case for any mark, any date. Nothing. Blank. On screen, nothing stirred. Just my empty room. Then, barely noticeable, the door moved. It swung inward, impossibly slow, opening just a crack. From the dark hallway, an arm reached into the frame. Unnaturally long. Thin. Skin like mottled ash. Fingers stretched into spider-like claws. It hung in the air as if tasting it, then withdrew. The door stayed slightly open. I spun toward the closed basement door behind me. My breath came in sharp gasps. Too painful, too loud. The digital readout on the corner of the tape footage said 3:17 p.m. My watch, 3:16 p.m. 1 minute. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't random. It wasn't old memories. These tapes were meant for me. The collection wasn't a mess. It was carefully assembled. Every tape I'd watched was chosen to guide me here, to this moment, to this understanding. The static sound roared back, louder, filling the air. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I staggered back from the monitor, eyes locked on the image of my bedroom door hanging ajar. The line between watcher and watched had ripped apart. The tapes didn't just show the past. They predicted the future, the immediate future. My watch ticked over to 3:17 p.m. Somewhere above me, in the deep silence of the house, my bedroom door began to creak open. My watch had just ticked over to 3:17 p.m., and upstairs my bedroom door was creaking open exactly as shown on the tape. This wasn't a recording of the past. It was predicting the present. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stood frozen, ears straining to catch any sound from above. The silence that followed was worse than any noise could have been. I needed to see what was happening upstairs, but my legs wouldn't move. My mind raced with questions. How could the tape show what was happening now? Who or what had opened my door? After what felt like hours but must have been mere minutes, I forced myself to climb the basement stairs. Each step took tremendous effort, as if the air itself had thickened to the consistency of molasses. I peered up the staircase to the main floor, half expecting to see that tall, emaciated figure looming at the top. Nothing waited for me there, at least nothing visible. But the air felt different somehow, heavier, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I made my way toward my bedroom, the floorboards creaking underfoot despite my attempt to move silently. My bedroom door stood partially open just as the tape had shown. I approached it with my hand outstretched, trembling. With a quick motion, I pushed it fully open and flipped on the light. The room appeared untouched. My unmade bed, laptop on the desk, clothes draped over the chair, all exactly as I'd left them. But something felt wrong. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I scanned every corner, checked under the bed, and yanked open the closet door. Nothing. But then I noticed it. My window was open a crack. I knew I'd left it closed. As I moved to shut it, something on my desk caught my eye. A white VHS tape sat beside my laptop. I hadn't brought any tapes upstairs. A sick feeling washed over me as I approached it. My name was written across the label in neat, precise letters. Michael. That was when I made my decision. No amount of money was worth this. Whatever game Julian Croft was playing, I wanted no part of it. I would pack my things and leave immediately. Professional reputation be damned. I threw my belongings into my suitcase haphazardly, constantly glancing over my shoulder. Every shadow in the room seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. Every reflection in the mirror or window glass seemed to contain a tall, thin silhouette just at the edge of my vision. As I zipped my suitcase closed, my eyes fell again on the tape with my name. Despite my better judgment, I picked it up. The plastic casing felt unusually warm in my hand, almost as if it were alive. I knew I should leave it behind, but something compelled me to slip it into my jacket pocket. I had to know what was on it. I carried my suitcase down to the car first, eager to have everything ready for a quick escape. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. Each time a branch swayed in the wind, I flinched, seeing the observer's elongated limbs in every movement. Back inside, I stood at the top of the basement stairs, the tape burning a hole in my pocket. I should just leave, drive away, and never look back. But the need to know, the same cursed curiosity that had led me to take this job, wouldn't let me go. One last thing, I whispered to myself, then I'm gone. I descended into the basement one final time, the lights flickering briefly as I reached the bottom. The workstation hummed with quiet efficiency, waiting for me. I approached it slowly, removed the tape from my pocket, and with trembling fingers, inserted it into the VCR. The screen flickered to life, showing an angle of the basement I'd never seen before, from high in one corner, like a security camera. And there I was, working at the station over the past several days. I watched myself becoming increasingly agitated as the days progressed. My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was watching. This wasn't just a recording, it was surveillance footage. Someone, something, had been watching me the entire time. I fast-forwarded through the footage and stopped, my mouth going dry. There I was, upstairs in my bedroom, frantically packing my suitcase, just minutes ago. The footage was live. Somehow, impossibly, I was watching a live feed on an analog VHS tape, a technological paradox that couldn't exist. The camera angle smoothly panned away from my bedroom, moving through the house with impossible fluidity. It stopped, focusing on the basement door, the very door directly behind me where I sat. And on the screen, I watched in horror as the door behind me began to open. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. The basement door was really opening, slow and steady, its hinges groaning exactly in time with the sound from the television. Reality and the recording had crashed together in one awful moment. In the darkness beyond the doorway, I saw a tall, impossibly thin shape. Its body was all wrong, arms and legs too long, chest too narrow. It stood frozen, watching me, waiting. I didn't think. I just ran. Pure instinct took over as I lunged past my workstation, knocking over gear in my mad scramble for the stairs. The clatter echoed through the huge basement while I took steps 2 or 3 at a time, breathing in ragged gasps. Behind me something moved way too fast. Not footsteps, but a crackling, popping sound, like static electricity skittering across the stone floor. I burst out Croft Manor's front door into the cold night air. My car waited in the driveway, keys still in my pocket. I fumbled them out with shaking hands, dropping them once before unlocking the door. As I slid behind the wheel, some weird urge made me look back at the house. My eyes went straight to my bedroom window upstairs. 2 figures stood there, outlined against the dim light. One was the observer, its stretched-out shape clear as day. The other was me, or something wearing my face. It stood stiffly beside that thing, face blank as a mask. As I watched, frozen in horror, my double raised its hand in a mocking goodbye. I drove. For hours I drove with no plan, putting as many miles as I could between me and that house. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every few miles I'd spot something tall and thin in my rearview mirror, standing still by the roadside. When I looked again, it vanished. That was 3 days back. I've been moving ever since, sleeping in my car, buying gas with cash. I've tried to tell myself it was all some crazy hallucination from being alone and stressed. But deep inside, I know better. Last night, in a motel bathroom, I caught my reflection. For a second, it didn't move when I did. Its eyes held that same dead stare I'd seen in the window. Now I get what Julian Croft wanted. He didn't hire me to digitize his collection. He hired me to become part of it. Those tapes weren't just recordings, they were pathways. By watching them, I gave the energy and awareness that let whatever was trapped inside cross over. Now something's crossed over wearing my face, while I've turned into just another recording, a moment frozen in time, playing on an endless loop. I don't know why Croft picked me. Maybe he saw something in me that made me weak to this. Or maybe I was just desperate enough to take the job without asking questions. What I know is I'm not free. Wherever I go, the observer follows. I spot it in reflections, in shadows, out of the corner of my eye, always watching, always waiting. The real scary part? I'm starting to think it's been watching me my whole life, long before I set foot in Croft Manor. Those tapes were just a formality, a way to make the link official. I just wonder who else is watching me now.